introduce our last speaker, who happened to be the very first speaker that I booked for us in January. Evan Hirsch is a founder and executive creative director of engine company number 4. That fire engine theme is sort of one reason why he's giving this talk entitled Smelling Smoke, Knowing the Warning Signs of Trouble Inside Your Studio. He has worked at a lot of different places, and I assume he has helped burn down some studios as well. I think this is a very good talk to close with.
Thanks, Dean. Good afternoon. So in keeping with our theme of global domination, I was thinking a lot that if you're going to be dominating the world, it helps to be a successful genius and not an evil genius. I think a lot about, as I've been helping some studios, and I've learned a very important thing, that the difference between a recluse and a genius is one ships. And all too often we see genius pursuing things that don't work and don't ship very well. Now this could theoretically be an icon for shipping, or back in the crazy days of EA, you would rent a couple of these to take everybody to the wrap party after a big successful launch. But in practical reality, a couple years ago, about 25 years ago, I got to study airplane crashes. And what's interesting about airplane crashes is airplanes are very complex systems that take people to very interesting places. But when they crash, it means a minimum of 3 things went wrong. Not 1, not 2, but 3 things went wrong in sequence. So the way you save people's lives is you break the chain of events. Making games is not entirely unlike an airplane. Many complex systems, many human factors, many emotions involved in safety or not safety, or in a vision, or going to a specific place. So what I want to talk to you about is really the concept that there's about 10 things I see in studios that are in a lot of trouble. It started many years ago when I was at EA. I would try to help teams get back on track. And over the last few years, it's worked a lot more time working with investors. But at the end of the day, when you're doing due diligence on a game or a studio, or you're in there actually trying to turn things around, there's 3, I'm going to show you the 3 most common things I run into. And if you can remove any one of those 3 events, more than likely your team will ship and everybody lives. Before I get into the specifics of failure, though, I want to talk about success. And for me, what I've really learned the difference of success is, or the biggest indicator of success, is when the studio has a culture of craft. That you have a craft to what you do. There's a craft to architecture, there's a craft to design, there's a craft to leadership, but most importantly, there's a craft to design. And craft is what you do and what you lean on when you're in trouble. When things aren't going well, it's the craft that will really help a team stay successful. When I think of design craft, or the craft of design in terms of proper product design, it's really about having a problem that you define and using every creative skill you have at your plate to deliver on that promise, okay? And I think in the games industry, I think we've been kind of light on the discipline of design. And I think it's unfortunate because the part of design is knowing your constraints, knowing your user. And if you can develop that, you can do things very, very well. So the joke is that often when I get called and I go to a studio, and usually you don't know I'm there because of confidentiality reasons that the publisher doesn't want people to know, or the investors don't want people to know. But the truth is, the joke is, here comes Mr. Wolf from Pulp Fiction. And the reality is it's a lot more like Dr. Phil, right? Because so often what's happening is communication's broken down, accusations are flying, and things are in trouble. But what it really comes down to is the clients always lie. They can't help themselves. The good ones even lie. And that's actually something Philip Marlowe used to write back in the days of the film noir. But the point is that sometimes they'll say, actually, the team's got great communication skills, or they all know what I want to make. Or if we just get rid of John, everything's going to fall into place. And the truth is, even though they mean well, it's usually more complex than that, or I wouldn't be there. Great products over-deliver great emotions and great connections on a simple promise. Simple focus. The cleaner the focus, the cleaner the idea, the more the emotional ability you have to punch and connect with customers and end users and players and create that relationship. And to keep that focus, I find that it's complexity that will do you in, right? And so the first thing I often do when I get to a studio is, I'll ask the people, what is the game design? And they'll tell me, here it is, and it's this great big design doc. In the old days, it'll be a 700-page Word doc. Word is not a design tool. It just isn't. Word is not going to promote transparency. So what happens is people write design docs. That's the first sign of trouble. The first sign of trouble is when your design for your game is in Word, or a document or text document, whatever. When it's not up on the walls and people can't see it and live it, you've effectively blindfolding your team. And if your team is blindfolded, there's very little chance they can deliver on their vision or your vision, because it's the visibility and transparency that everybody can see when you have all these high-performing people on a game team where their ideas fit or don't fit, that you can get this ability to create that simple promise and deliver on it. So what I do is I go around and I ask every single person in the studio what game they're making. And what I like to do is, because I'm kind of a little bit mischievous, is I start the night before with the executive team or the investors, whoever has brought me in, and ask them what game they're expecting. And what's interesting is if we're doing this mathematically, where G is the number of, the number of different answers I get, if that number's higher than 3, just go home. If it's higher than 3, go home. And you'd be surprised how often that number starts at 10. And now people, I'll hear, well, it's a little nuance. And it's not that. It's the nuance that makes it clear and focus of what you're going to deliver. That nuance and that clarity means you can develop and deliver a simple emotional connection to your users. And we heard them talking about users yesterday. We heard the guys at Wooga talking about it again today. But knowing what you're making and being able to do it quickly and easily and clearly, that's one of the biggest indicators of success. It starts at the bottom, it goes to the top, and it doesn't make a difference who you are in that team. If you can't tell me the game in one sentence without using 6 other games to describe it, you're probably not going in the right direction. The second idea is a rhythm of the business, okay? Does your team have a predictable rhythm to what they do, when they do it, and when they can see it? Because what happens is, if your team's development schedule looks like this, and that's the vertical slice, and I can't tell you how often you see this, you're in deep trouble. This is the difference of a game that had a great demo at E3, or had a great demo in the press, and then delivered a turd. Delivered at 40 Metacritic, because they put everything into that one level, and they had nothing time out to figure out how that level transfers out into a complete experience. So what happens is this leaves the marketing department holding the bag. Or worse, it just eats up all your resources, and you have no time, and then you're making bad decisions, if any decisions at all. So the point is that if you can get to a rhythm of your business where you know what you're going to do, when it's going to be done, then you're immediately setting things up. But part of the rhythm of the business is when you have a staff that doesn't work openly and transparently, and everything's working like this way, where I'll let you see it when it's done, and they come out and they show it to you in the end, you're in deep, deep trouble. So the notion of fail fast is never more true than it is in game development, especially if you believe me that you shouldn't be doing game design in Word. Take small prototypes, paper prototypes, prototypes of G.I. Joe. My favorite prototype I ever saw was Chris Cross designing Medal of Honor in a 6-foot physical sandbox at EA. And he had miniature army toys, and it was genius. And this was back in the days of Polaroids, but he would actually take everything out, and they would Polaroid the fight. And you put it up on a wall, and everybody could see what that level was going to be in minutes. Absolute genius. You can do it in PowerPoint, but if you need, you can do it in Unity, whatever it is, but if you need code to show an idea and it takes more than 48 hours, it's probably not going to get you in the right place. So having even a rhythm of how often we iterate and how often we do feedback. Do we have a daily play test? Do we, by the team, do we have daily feedback? If they're not knowing the reality of what comes when, then it makes it really, really hard to know that you can generate enough ideas to find the one good one that works and makes the difference to move the needle on your game. And the last thing of the same area, and within this topic I want to talk about, is the feedback cycle. Not only is there respect for time and iteration, but what is the feedback cycle? If I do something on Monday, when am I going to get the feedback? And by the way, it's going to take 3 weeks to get up to the boss to find out the boss is going to come back down and hated it. That can destroy morale on a team and send you into tailspins like you can't believe. That you do stuff, you throw it over, or you think it's great, or the colleagues think it's great, and the bosses, the investors, the marketing department can't sell it. You might as well just get infecting team with Ebola. Because it's going to be a slow, painful death. And they will revolt. Okay? There needs to be a daily critique culture of the game, of the mechanic, of the play, of all the mechanisms. And if you do that, you're already on the right track. But the one thing to be careful of is a very toxic culture of feedback. Pixar, if you haven't read the article that Ed Catmull wrote in the Harvard Business Review about the brain trust, you should really read it. And there's a notion in the brain trust of open, brutal, honest transparency. It's about trust. It's about actionable feedback. It's about honest feedback. It's about ownership in the feedback. And it's about explaining what you can and can't take. What's the state of the work, and what's the state of the feedback you need? That feedback loop, if it's part of a daily culture of breathing, then when things start going off the track, you knew early on. And if you've got that clear brief, and you've got that clear direction, and that clear focus, then giving feedback against that, not versus what the current market trend is, or what the current thing that turns somebody on, or what the bright, shiny light is, then the team knows what they're going towards. and they can see it time in and time out, and they can actually feel the differences. And immediately you have a healthy culture in your studio as opposed to a culture of blame and toxic feelings and preciousness. Right? Again, the concept they talked about this morning with Wooga, which was brilliant, about killing is ordinary. Killing their ideas is ordinary. And it's no big deal when we kill a project. That's because they're going through that trash can of all the light bulbs for the good ones, because people don't take it personally when there's bad feedback. And that's how you create an environment that's not toxic. It's healthy. It's honest. It's brutally honest, but it's thoughtful. That allows then the team to have scalpels, to cut the things that aren't working. Because that's the other thing, is precious lambs or precious animals or sacred cows, whatever the correct analogy is I'm looking for. But the notion that you can carefully cut out that which is not working and move on. Holding on to romantic notions will cause you not to ship. Getting rid of those things that don't have any real value, that don't move the needle, but just because somebody thought they were cool, is not useful. Using this is the counter to the lack of focus. And the third key thing I want to talk about is trust. I kind of alluded to a little bit in feedback, but there's a real interesting dynamic. This is the typical game studio boss, second guy on your left, from the left. And the boss, you know, we're gamers, we're all kind of friendly, we're all family, we all go out together, we drink together, we're everybody's friends. So, you know, I like to tell everybody we're all equals here. The truth is he thinks he's this way, you know, just a wee bit bigger. But the problem is, more than likely he's viewed that way. And the feedback this man gives is not proportionate. And that's okay as long as it's clear what that is. But the bigger problem is when that's the view. When that's the view, the feedback he's giving is not well received, but most importantly, the feedback and the answers he's getting from his staff are not reliable. If you have a culture where you can't get honest feedback on what's working and what's not working, what the expectations are and what are they not going to do, that you don't like this decision and impacted the team this way, then you have no chance of really knowing what that team's making. This is how you set yourself up for a PR nightmare and a financial nightmare. Because your team's out the door, you have no idea what anybody was capable of, and you don't know what actually shipped. So the question I ask when I go in is, how often does the boss walk the floor? It's a culture. Does he know people's names? Is he walking around? Can he get straight answers? If he's only there when there's trouble, what kind of answers is he going to get? Nothing useful. Okay? So that, in 12 minutes, is a very good crash course on smelling smoke. I tried to go very quick. I've got time for 2 more questions, about 2 questions if anybody has. But if not, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a question. Why games? I feel like you could give this... Sorry, why games? I feel like you could give this at any company on the face of the planet, and it would be good advice.
To be truthful, I do it in games, film, and animation. But yeah, fair enough. This is the space I know. Thank you. Is there another question? Great. Thank you very much.